welcome to this video on teaching tips within inside of Business Central. So as part of Release Wave 1 in 2021, Microsoft has introduced teaching tips into Business Central. Now this is new functionality, it's not something we had prior to this, and it's essentially an onboarding tool. So if I was to go to a page that has teaching tips within inside of Business Central, such as the sales invoices, this was the first time I'd visited this page, in the bottom left here I'd have a teaching tip to sort of do a tour of what this page is. Because I've already visited, I can click at the top here and it'll give me that anyway, so I'm going to click retake tour and it's going to give me the tips for a few things on this page. So we've got the number and it gives you a bit of an overview of what the number is. It's also attached to some actions, so under posting, under post invoice they've assigned a teaching tip. And they've also assigned to the navigate action and posted sales invoices to sort of give you an overview that once you post an invoice, that's where it goes to. So these are really useful and they've been added in numerous pages in the system. Now, the really good thing about these is that they're extensible. So we can look at extending pages that already have teaching tips on them and extending those teaching tips. So for example, on the sales invoices, we could add some additional steps in here. At the minute there's only 3, we could add some additional ones in. We can also look at adding teaching tips onto pages that don't currently have anything on there. So for example, I went to sales orders, sales orders. There's no teaching tips on this page at all, so we could look at introducing them onto pages like this. And the final one is we could obviously create our own bespoke pages with teaching tips on them as well. So in today's video, we're going to have a look at how we do that. To extend or introduce these tips into pages in Business Central, we need to make use of 2 new properties. We've got about title and about text. So these are 2 properties that need to be set at every level that we want to introduce these tips onto. So the first one we'll do is create a page extension against a page that's already got tips on it. So sales invoice tips page, so sales invoice list. So I've created a page extension against this. We'll modify a field on here. I'll modify the amount field. So with inside this column, I'm going to add in about title, and we'll say amount on the invoice, and then we'll do an about text, which is what will appear underneath. Description that'll do. So therefore now I've extended that teaching tip to have an additional, so there should be 4 on there when we look at that now, against the amount column. Now the other thing we can do as well is we can modify actions as well. As we saw, there's like actions on posting of the sales invoice and stuff like that, so let's modify an action as well, and we'll use the posting preview. I think it's all preview. Posting preview, and we'll again just do exactly the same thing. If that's what I'm talking about, it's actions. I need to do modify and preview. Yeah, preview, and then exactly the same way I'll do about title, and about text, which is the thing that will print underneath it, allows you to preview the posting document so that you can review entries before they hit the ledger. Again, another pretty lazy description, but that'll do. So there I have added teaching tip onto the field amount on the sales invoice list page and onto the preview posting. So now I've published that to my Business Central sandbox tenant. If I search that page in here, so it's sales invoice list, so I've searched sales invoices. This page now, when I go into the tips of it, should have 5. So I do retake tour, and we've now got 5 tips. We've got the number 1, which was already there. We've then got my new one, amount on the invoice. We've got theirs on how to post an invoice, and then we've got my new one here as well about preview posting an invoice, and then the final one of the standard how to get to posted sales invoices. So that's how we look at extending an existing page with teaching tips already on it. We'll now look at how we add teaching tips to a standard page that doesn't have teaching tips. So back in VS Code, I've created another page extension, exact same as the last time. I've extended the general ledger setup this time though instead of the sales invoices. Done a modifier on 2 columns, so just tried to modify the teaching tips on allow posting from and allow posting to. So again, just doing the exact same thing, doing a modifier on those fields, putting an about title and about text in. Now if I was to publish this to Business Central, nothing would show up. So for pages that don't already have teaching tips on them, we have to add the about title and the about text at the top of the page. So in this example, for the general ledger setup, I'll have to add in here an about title property, call it general ledger setup page, and then an about text. I'm going to put on this page, you can specify how to handle certain accounting issues in your company. So that's the main difference. Now if I publish that to Business Central, we should get some teaching tips in there. So that's the key difference. On a page that doesn't already have tips defined and we want to extend that, we have to add in the about title and the about text property to the top of that page. So now we're back in Business Central. If I go to the page I've just extended, which is the general ledger setup, now because I've visited this page before, the tour's not available in the bottom left, but if I click up here and do retake tour, you can see we've now got the 2 tips that I've just added, so on the allow posting from and the allow posting to. So that's how we add it onto a page that already has a page that doesn't have any tip functionality on it at all. That's how we add it into a page that exists within the system, but we just want to extend it to add new tips onto it. We'll now look at how we add tips onto a completely bespoke page, so a new page we're defining within the system. So now we're back inside VS Code again, and I've created a bespoke page, which is a standard page 5.03. I've created a page based off the customer table, and just added a field in here called name. So when I added the field in, I had to add in my about title and about text, give some information about it, and then I've also had to add about title and about text at the top of the page, just like I did with the GL setup one. So it works exactly the same way as when you extend a page that doesn't already have help tips on it. We have to come into the top of the page, add the 2 properties in before we add them in against the properties of the field of the action we're updating. So if I now publish this to Business Central, this is a completely standalone page that I've just created that will have teaching tips on it. So there we can see tool's been added. Click on that, it's just got my 1 teaching tip that I've just added in for the name field against there. So that's an overview of the 3 different scenarios I believe that sort of teaching tips can be implemented. I think the main idea behind the teaching tips is to give people hints and tips sort of in the name around pages rather than being used as wizards on how to create a page. So I don't think they're intended to be implemented on a sales order on how to create a sales order, but more to point out some tips around certain fields on there and certain actions on the sales order, like we've seen on the posted sales invoice, where it's got information about what happens to a sales invoice once it's posted and where that goes in the system, rather than it being a teaching tip on how to create a posted sales invoice.